Welcome back, friends. This video has been 12 years in the making. This is the first day that Jack and I will be cutting wood together. He's never ran a chainsaw before, and I told him that when he turned 12 in the fall that I would teach him to run a saw, and if you did a good job, I'll buy you your own saw. So this is going to be maybe a couple 2 or 3 part video series. We'll go over fundamentals, how to operate a saw carefully, how to teach your kids to do it, maybe some things to consider in purchasing saws, and even the equipment you might want to take out with you in the field. We've got a pretty big job. We've got 2 big dug firs down here on the ground that we're going to buck to length. We're going to be showing how we process this not only firewood but wood for lumber. We'll take portions of it out that we'll use for sawmilling. We'll take other portions out that we'll use for firewood, and then the limbs and such that we'll stack those in a way that will make a nice habitat for the critters around here. So we'll show you how to do the whole process, the bucking, the skidding, the cutting, all of these things. I think you'll enjoy it. And so let's get started first with maybe some considerations for safety equipment. So we'll start off with the 5 essential pieces of personal safety equipment that you're going to want before you do any type of work with the chainsaw. Jack, what are they? Number
you're
1.
Gonna want.
Start from the top and work down.
Helmet.
Helmet. Now, helmet's important. You don't often see guys cutting firewood with a helmet, but if you're doing any type of work under a canopy or forest, it's really important because these limbs come down and they get loose, and the vibration of a power saw, they'll come down. I've seen actual limbs come down in a fire 2 years ago, wildland fire, that the guy had spent his own money and bought a Kevlar helmet instead of just the plastic issued ones. And it's the best helmet money could buy, and a limb came down and punctured that and penetrated through about 1 inch. And we all saw that helmet and wondered what would have happened had he been wearing one of these. So a helmet's really important. Not only that, but it can really save your face and head in the event of a kickback. If you're not running your saw properly and it comes back, you can see that a chainsaw can come back, and if you have a helmet on, that can give you just that extra little bit of protection that you need. What's
You're
next?
making me worried the fact that I don't have a metal one.
The plastic one is fine for that. You're not going to have any kickback problems today. After the helmet, what's next?
Then eye protection.
Eye protection. Now, what I recommend are these Bugs goggles. We all wear these in the Forest Service, in the Fire Service, because they're a wire mesh. A lot of loggers wear them as well, and they won't fog up. Running a chainsaw and cutting is really, it's a very exhausting, it's a very physical job, and you'll sweat, and regular eye protection will fog up and it just gets dirty, becomes a problem. So the Bugs wire goggles are the superior for cutting. What's after that? Number 3. Ear protection. If you're going to wear a hard hat, you're going to have to go with squishy plugs or custom-made plugs. Muffs are just not going to work unless you have a helmet they're incorporated into with a face shield. Those are fine. A lot of guys like them. I don't personally like them. I find them too bulky and limiting. But if you want to use that, that's fine. What's next?
Chaps or...
Chainsaw chaps and a good pair of gloves. One last thing before we start the saws, and something I'd probably recommend, always have an axe at hand. Jack's got a small axe, something that's going to have a reasonably short handle, something that you can operate with 1 or 2 hands, but is going to be used for lots of things. For cutting small limbs, it's easier sometimes to have an axe than a chainsaw. It's going to be used for pounding wedges. You want to make sure something that's got a nice flat pole on the back of it and a safe way to carry it. Jack's also, I've got him equipped here with a small wedge. Get in the habit of having wedges on you, 1 or 2. If you're falling, certainly 2 or more. I carry these bigger ones in my pocket, or just put them in your back pocket. I've got the little one there for Jack. They're just handy if you get yourself in a pinch or in a bind, or you need to just 1,000 different things. Get your bar unstuck, you can use those wedges, and you should just always have that in your back pocket. My faller's belt, I'm going to have a couple other things. We've covered this stuff before, but a good sturdy leather belt, an axe sheath, a way that you can carry your axe on your back and access it without undoing a bunch of straps and things. Of course, the very best ones made are the Grizzly Peak, made in Idaho. Grizzly Peak Enterprises, they'll make these for you, whatever size axe you want. A logger's tape, if you're going to be doing dimensional lumber or doing any sawmilling, chainsaw milling, or using your wood miser or Lucas mill, you want that on you so you can get an idea of what lengths to cut. And then your chainsaw tool, especially if you're cutting in brush or really woolly stuff. Sometimes it'll throw your chainsaw. You want to have that. You don't want to stop what you're doing and have to run up to the house and grab one. So
and this has a really funny name.
Scrench. Yeah, it's called a scrench because it's a wrench and a screwdriver. Cut it, drill a hole in it, put it on a piece of P-cord, put it on a clip on your belt so that you can get to it real quickly. And then I really highly recommend some sort of a personal first aid kit with a tourniquet, a combat tourniquet, an IFAK type of thing, you know, something very similar to what the troops are using. If you have a chainsaw wound, if you're working in the woods by yourself, this right there, that little investment, is the difference between life or death. It doesn't take up much space, and I'd really highly recommend it. You should have that on your person within reach, and on your belt even better. All right, so let's get Jack, let's go over the fundamentals of working with the chainsaw. I'll show you some of the hazards. We'll get it fired up and you make your first cut. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. So Jack and I spent a couple hours this morning going over safety and everything and how the saw works, all the nomenclature, and I think he understands it. But basically what it comes down to is just get a saw, if you're teaching little ones or you're teaching your kids, something that's got the shortest bar on it that you can, that's reasonably lightweight. We'll be using just a small 260. This is a pro saw. It's a wonderful saw. If you were just going to have one and you weren't doing serious wood cutting, this is the one I'd recommend. It's going to be twice as much money as some of the consumer saws, but it's going to be a saw that'll last you a lifetime if you take care of it. I've got about a 16-inch bar on there for Jack, and you ready to get started? All right, let's start it up. Now, if you're a beginner, I'd recommend you do follow the manual, and that will be put a foot in it. Put a foot in it, grasp it tightly, and then pull the cord and start it with the brake on. Now, of course, if you're more of an advanced user, that's just not practical. You know, nobody's going to be doing that. So the Forest Service has a way of starting it between your legs when you're standing. You can start it that way. That's approved. It must be safe. I'm sure they've spent millions of dollars researching that. You're going to see guys who are going to drop start them too. So, you know, it all depends on, I'm not going to tell you what to do. It all depends on your skill level. But for beginners, I'm going to insist, Jack, that you start it the proper way. Make sure your brake is on, grasp it firmly, and pop it. So what I'm going to be teaching Jack today, first off, we're going to do some basic bucking. We've got a log down here. It's got a swelled end on it. We're going to cut a 16-inch section or so off of there, and just to get a feel for that, a feel of working the saw, a feel of controlling the power and the throttle, and to doing it safely. So what I'll do, Jack, is I'll demonstrate here how to do it. Watch my hand position. It's really important that your hand is always two hands on the saw at all times. Never one saw, because if you have one hand and something were to come back, there's nothing to arrest it from coming back on you. So make sure that you have two hands on the saw at all times. On top,
you'd have one off is that you'd smack the brake.
Right. So if the brake is on and you're cutting and the saw comes back, look what happens. It engages the brake. It's designed to do that. So not a hand down here, not a hand over here. Those are all advanced falling techniques. Those are not for you right now. But for you, your hand needs to always be here with the thumb wrapped around there on the top bar and one on the trigger. Now when we come in to make our buck here, Jack, we've got to ascertain on the tree is what's going on with it, with the leg. Is it being suspended on both ends? If that's the case, then we have a whole bunch of pressure or tension or compression in the top here. And if it's going like this, if it's suspended on both sides, when you start cutting, that's going to close, it's going to pinch your bar. Now if it's suspended in the middle, if it's sitting on a stump and both the edges don't have very much weight in it, then we're going to have a lot of compression on the bottom. So before I cut, if I don't have a sheath, I'm going to take my axe out and I'm going to put it somewhere on the log where I can get to it if I need it. Don't put it on the piece you're going to cut, because it'll roll away. But I'll put it up here, and it's there, out of my way if I need it. Always know where your tip is at all times. By not paying attention to your tip and putting it in the ground and hitting a rock, it causes you to stop and lose 20 minutes to refile your saw. So it's better to stop, put your brake on. If you're unsure, look over and see. We don't want to get that tip of that saw down in the dirt. All right, so we had some technical difficulty. We had a messed up bar. That 15-inch bar is no good. It wouldn't cut. So we swapped it over for a 25 and a brand new chain. So this is a little bit big, but I think you're big enough to handle it. So are you ready to cut?
Mm-hmm.
So this, I want you to cut just to the left of the kerf here. So that was good. It was really good. So you felt using your senses and you watch that gap start to open up a little bit. You got off the trigger and you were really good about when you broke through on those fibers that you caught the bar before it went down into the dirt. Maybe a little bit, hit that throttle to zing, 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 just a little bit. You'll feel the saw go through and it should just bounce and you should be able to hold it up out of the dirt. But that was very, very good. Only thing I could say is you're cutting a little bit crooked. It's really hard to judge that when you're sitting on the side of a slope because you're cutting at an angle, but that'll come with time. But those are really good. Those are good fire rounds, and you have really good throttle control. You're able to move the saw. You're starting to feel it. You're starting to be able to use your body to counteract its pull and the pressure, and it looked really good.